New reports have cast doubt on a couple of key contract situations for a couple of key Baltimore Ravens. We talk about that and so much more coming up on Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Ravens. Welcome into the show. I'm your host, Kevin Oestreicher of Ravens Wire, here with you on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and now the #1 sports podcast network. Thanks so much for being here and making us a part of your day here on Locked On Ravens. We're a 5-day-a-week Baltimore Ravens podcast, plus we have more content for you. We cover the Ravens each and every single day here on the show. We have a jam-packed episode. It is crossover Thursday, so Spencer Drummond of Locked On Browns will be joining to talk about that Ravens and Browns Week 11 matchup. But first, we have a couple of things to talk about, with some contract situations with the Ravens, as well as some injuries for the Ravens. So thanks so much for being here again. Today's episode of Locked On Ravens and this crossover Thursday is presented by PrizePicks. Download the PrizePicks app today. Use code Locked On NFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. All right, let's dive right into this here, because there was an article by Matt Bowen and Jeremy Fowler over at ESPN. They did a 2026 NFL free agency early top 2025 rankings and predictions. And in this article, there was information on Tyler Linderbaum, Travis Jones, and Isaiah Likely. Now, for Linderbaum, Jeremy Fowler said that Linderbaum's considered a top 10 interior offensive lineman in the eyes of execs, coaches, and scouts. That makes him an expensive option, poised to become one of the highest paid centers. The Ravens have discussed an extension with Linderbaum, but are not within striking distance on a deal. When the Ravens declined his fifth-year option in the spring, that enhanced his chances for free agency. It cast doubt on Linderbaum signing a deal with the Ravens, this particular report, but I still think that Linderbaum will be back in the Ravens uniform. Again, just because these reports are coming out doesn't mean, Linderbaum's not signing, it's over. That's not the case. I mean, it doesn't necessarily shock me at this moment they're not within striking distance on a deal. It's nothing that's out of the ordinary. It does cast a little doubt in my opinion, but I do think something will get worked out. I think he's too important to the Ravens on the offensive side of the ball. Now, in terms of Isaiah Likely, he was number 9 on this list, and Jeremy Fowler said several team executives anticipate Likely doing very well in free agency because he can serve as a matchup problem who can separate from coverage. Part of the equation, the tight end franchise tag in 2026 is very reasonable, $15.8 million. Some people I've talked to inside the league would not be surprised if Baltimore tags him, especially with its top 3 tight ends hitting free agency. That, again, coming from Jeremy Fowler. If it is the tag and they decide to go down that route, again, that is a 1-year cap hit of $15.8 million. So the Ravens have to figure out the rest of their extensions, one of which would be Travis Jones. And Jeremy Fowler saying on Travis Jones in this here, multiple teams consider him the best defensive tackle to potentially be available. He's also an NFC executive said, very tough to block, elite run stopper, a wide-bodied guy who has enough pass rush. The Ravens could attempt to re-sign Jones, but aren't afraid to let key players leave via free agency. One player comp from an NFC exec, Dalvin Tomlinson, who got $57 million over 4 years from Cleveland in 2023. I wouldn't hate that deal for Travis Jones. I'd be okay with signing Travis Jones to a 4-year, $57 million contract. Again, the guaranteed money would have to be worked out and whatnot. So again, I know that people were reading this report. I saw it on social media. Some people were freaking out about it, being like, everybody's leaving. That's where the in doubt stuff came, because it's like, all right, well, not close on Linder, or not within striking distance, I guess, on Linderbaum, and likely might get franchise tagged instead of the long-term extension. And Travis Jones, the Ravens aren't afraid to let key players leave. Everyone's like, what's going on? The Ravens will have to deal with that in the offseason. I would love it if one of these guys got signed during the season. It is kind of difficult to do that and sign guys during the season, but the Ravens do have some big decisions to make here. 3 guys that are really, really important to what they do on both sides of the ball. The Ravens also with some injury news. Lamar Jackson didn't practice on Wednesday. Hopefully he's back today on Thursday. Marlon Humphrey ruled out for this game after having a pin put in his finger. The Ravens a little banged up right now, but again, they should be able to beat Cleveland. And speaking of Cleveland, Spencer Drummond, Locked On Browns, he'll join us now to talk about the Ravens and Browns Week 11 matchup and so much more.
Kevin, listen, the more things stay the same, the more they look a little bit different in this division. Obviously, these two teams are plenty familiar with each other, but this time around, there's some pretty noticeable differences, especially on the Browns side of things, as a team that's changed quarterbacks already, changed play callers already, heading in a very different direction than the Ravens, who back in week 2 were very optimistic about the outlook of the season. I feel like the Ravens have kind of played like 2 different seasons at this point, because back then it was, they're Super Bowl contenders, and then they go on a little bit of a losing streak after they beat the Browns, and now they're sort of right back in the mix for a playoff spot and the division. I guess I'm kind of curious to start there. Just how has it been following that path for the Ravens, a team that has obviously had massive expectations, felt like they were out of it, but the Steelers, being unable to run away with this division, have kind of kept the door open instead.
It's been an experience. That's how I would probably define it. I mean, it's been new in a lot of different ways, where the Ravens had never started a season as poorly as they had in multiple different categories ever. And, you can attribute some to injuries, some to poor play calling, some to poor execution. Just felt like everything was going wrong for them in a 1-5 start, where now almost all of their games are must-win games, and it's really been that way for the past month of the season, where, in a way, you always even look in September games to, that September loss won't really matter in September, but it'll certainly come back to bite you in December in some way, shape, or form. Now it's just like every loss can put you on the brink of elimination, because you already have your 5 losses. And you mentioned with the division, the way that it's looking right now, I would probably assume that only one AFC North team makes the postseason this year, and that seems like it's the Ravens' path. So things have been better. Lamar Jackson is back, although I guess not on Wednesday, and we'll get into that, I'm sure. But he returned from his hamstring injury. Now he's dealing with something different leading up to this Browns game on Sunday. But their defense was bad. Last in the league in scoring and in points given up and passing, rushing. The offense was struggling without Lamar Jackson, as I think everybody would assume that would be the case, considering how important he's been to the team. But, that Browns game before the winning streak they've gone on was really the lasting good memory that the Ravens had before they ended up losing a lot of their games. I mean, obviously the Lions, the Chiefs, and they had a really brutal start to their season. Their schedule has certainly softened up a lot, while Pittsburgh's has only gotten harder. But I'll tell you one thing. Ravens fans are very thankful Joe Flacco's not walking through that door on Sunday. They're very thankful that Jameis Winston is not walking through that door on Sunday, considering what happened last year. And they have an opportunity. This is actually going to be, once the Ravens finish this game against the Browns, they'll have played Cleveland twice before they played Cincinnati or Pittsburgh once. So an interesting schedule quirk there. But I know that, like you talked about with Cleveland, it's a very different team already than it was in week 2, a game that I think actually Cleveland saw some positive momentum early at times in that game, but then it obviously fell apart where the Ravens put up 40 plus points and the Browns couldn't get much of anything going. But the biggest story to me, at least for Baltimore, is Lamar Jackson not practicing on Wednesday. We'll see. He's back on the field for Thursday. Seems like that will be the case, but of course you can't, count your chickens till they hatch. Ravens also dealing with a couple other injuries too. Marlon Humphrey not going to play in this game with a finger injury. He had a pin put in. You're also looking at Justice Hill, who didn't practice, and a couple of others as well. What about Cleveland, though? What's Cleveland's injury situation like right now, Spencer?
Cleveland's actually relatively healthy, all things considered. That's kind of like the least of their storylines or concerns at this juncture of the season, which they in the past, like previous years, injuries have kind of been the story of the season. It's derailed a lot of what they want to do. But this year, they dealt with some injuries, especially early on in the offensive line. That seems to always be the case with the team, but they've stayed relatively healthy, all things considered. Only one guy missing practice on Wednesday, and Alex Wright, who's the rotating defensive end opposite of Myles Garrett. So that's, I think, good news for them. But I think the good news kind of stops there just in general for this Browns team when it comes to this matchup with Baltimore, who, like you alluded to, are more of a well-oiled machine at this point in terms of getting things back on track. Their schedule softened up a little bit. It is interesting that they haven't played any of the other division teams other than the Browns at this point. And I think that's why everyone's kind of looking at Baltimore and saying, listen, they have as good of a chance of anybody to get back in this thing and make a run at the division, in the playoffs, all those things, because their schedule kind of lays out that way where they still play so many division games, they can climb right back into this thing and certainly be back in the mix. So, and that starts on Sunday. Yeah, listen, like the last time these two teams played, like you said, it was Joe Flacco. Last year when they played in Cleveland, it was Jameis Winston. Right now, it's a Browns team that their offense still is trying to find its identity, 11 weeks into the season. And it wasn't really good with Joe Flacco. It's gotten maybe marginally better with Dylan Gabriel, and now a play caller change, which I do think bared some interesting results against the Jets last week, but not enough to obviously win that game when you give up 2 big special teams plays. And so I think those conversations and topics sort of still persist going into this week against Baltimore. Like there should be opportunities against this Ravens defense. I know they've made some changes. The way they're using Kyle Hamilton is pretty interesting now, like having him in the box a little bit more than they even did early on in the season. And there was a trade in there that they made obviously as well. But there is opportunities to certainly move the football against this Ravens defense. But I go into every single game not expecting much from the Browns offense in terms of being able to do that, even against some of the worst defenses in football. And the last time they played, when the Ravens defense was at its worst, they gave up 41 points. They only scored 17, and it was part of that stretch where they couldn't score 20 points, and they basically scored under 20 points or less, dating back to week 12 or 13 of last year. So those same problems persist. They're hoping Dylan Gabriel can sort of snap out of it a little bit here and get more on track. The big, I don't know, and if he plays poorly on Sunday, it's been a while since the Browns have played in front of their home crowd, dating back quite a few weeks now. There might be chance for Shedeur Sanders if Dylan Gabriel struggles against the Ravens on Sunday, because that's now, I think, the point in the season where we're at. I don't think that they're ready to make that move, clearly. And I think a lot of it just has to do with Kevin Stefanski has kind of tried to play his cards at different stages of the season. He made the switch to Dylan Gabriel pretty early on. Now he let that ride out for a little bit. Now he gave up the play calling. This is only going to be week 2 of that. And so I think the Shedeur thing is one of the last things he can actually do to try to breathe some life into this offense at some point this season. I don't think that's coming, though, until a little bit further down the line. But yeah, listen, it's a little bit different in terms of who's under center, but I don't think there's any reason for the Ravens to feel like there's something to fear there, because the Browns offense is still a mess at this juncture of the season.
Yeah, and the Ravens defense since the bye week, they've really come on strong. Just 3 touchdowns allowed, 10 forced turnovers, including on downs. You got 67.5 average opposing passer rating, 21 quarterback hits, giving up just 13.5 points per game. So it seems like they've turned a corner. The pass rush isn't there yet, but it has gotten better. The Ravens, they had their most pressures in a game since last week, which was great. So like the sack numbers, Myles Garrett has 11 sacks on the season for Cleveland. The Ravens' entire defense has 12 this season. So like the sack numbers aren't there right now for them, but we have seen the improvements. They've been a lot more aggressive with their blitzing. They were like a bottom 3 team in blitz percentage over the first like couple weeks of the season. They've skyrocketed all the way up into the top 10 in that. They've said essentially, because they're not a good rush 4 team. They can't get pressure without blitzing. So they said, if we're not going to get pressure, we're just going to bring the pressure to you, and we're going to make it work with it. And the Ravens historically have been successful against rookie and second-year quarterbacks. And just given the uniqueness of their defense and just how it looks in general, where Ravens against quarterbacks making their first 10 starts, they're 0-13 when facing a Lamar Jackson-led team, which obviously is a Ravens defense stat, not a Lamar Jackson stat. But even still, like that's some of the uniqueness that Baltimore's defense presents and brings on a weekly basis, dating back really as far as you want to. So that's going to be a big key. I know we're going to get into keys and matchups a little bit more coming up, but I do think that for the Ravens, they have an opportunity, and these are the games you have to win too. I mean, your schedule at the end of the season gets harder again. This is kind of the stretch where it's games that you probably should win, but like we saw in a couple of these games, whether it was that Deshaun Watson perfect second half with the shoulder or the Jameis Winston game, like this Browns team can beat you. You can't just show up and expect to win. You have to be able to get the job done, and Baltimore's going to hope that they can.
No doubt about it. We'll talk about some more of those matchups. We'll dissect it a little deeper with you coming up next on a crossover edition of Locked On Browns and Locked On Ravens. When the opening whistle blows on a new repair, get your crew moving forward with Supply House. Order today and see parts on your doorstep tomorrow. Over 280,000 plumbing, HVAC, and electrical items for the most trusted brands in the business. Their real-time inventory and honest lead times keep you from punting on projects, while their industry-leading customer service always has your blind side covered. Need parts fast for a project? Supply House has next-day delivery, which means if you have a project that cannot wait, if you're a homeowner, like me, you know what I'm talking about, the ones that pop up out of the blue at the most inopportune times, you can get the parts you need fast. Talk about a game changer. Join the free Trademaster program today and score serious perks like priority shipping, lower prices, and dedicated support lines. Visit supplyhouse.com to sign up for free and use promo code SHNFL5 for 5% off your first order. That's supplyhouse.com. Real people, real service. Check it out today. This crossover episode is also brought to you by PrizePicks. And you and I make decisions every day, but at PrizePicks, being right can get you paid. Don't miss any of the excitement this season, whether you're following the NFL, NBA, or both. There's no better place to jump in on the action. If you haven't tried it, PrizePicks is the simplest way to play. Just pick more or less on at least one player's stats, and if you get them right, you win. It takes less than 60 seconds to set your lineup, and you can play anywhere PrizePicks operates, including California, Texas, and Georgia. The new Stacks feature is a game changer. For example, you can now pick more on Donovan Mitchell's points, three-pointers, and assists in the same lineup. Plus, if one of your players leaves with an injury during the game, the injury reboot saves your lineup from a loss. Download the PrizePicks app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNFL for $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, it's good to be right. All right, back out of here on a crossover edition of Locked On Browns and Locked On Ravens as the two division foes get ready to square off here in Week 11, this time in Cleveland. And Kevin, there's obviously some interesting stuff to break down here in terms of matchups and things. And I'm curious to hear from your perspective some of the things that the Ravens are doing a little bit differently, especially on the offensive side of the football, to sort of help themselves out and get Lamar Jackson in rhythm, and some things that the Browns are going to have to be aware of in that regard. But I will just start us off with, I think, the matchup that always is intriguing when the Browns play any team, and that's who is Myles Garrett going to be lined up against on this Ravens team. Because, listen, we know what type of player he is. He had 5 sacks a couple weeks back against the Patriots, where he made Will Campbell look very pedestrian, and he's had a pretty good rookie season. But I they like to move him around at times too. I know that there's been some struggles for Roger Rosengarten at the right tackle spot, and I do think there's an opportunity there for the Browns to switch him to the opposite side a little bit and maybe see if he can have some success there, opposite of Ronnie Stanley. But either way, you always have to account, obviously, for Myles Garrett. And I think as the Ravens' game plan for this game, their game plan offensively is going to start with, how can we limit that guy from wrecking our entire offensive game plan and trying to, take Lamar Jackson down, because he's seen Lamar Jackson enough to kind of know some of his secrets and his tricks. And Myles is obviously a monster when it comes to giving this team a chance to win any football game.
I would put Myles Garrett over on that side. The Ravens' offensive line has been the clear weakness for them this season on the offensive side of the ball, particularly their guard spots with Daniel Falele and Andrew Voorhees. But Roger Rosengarten has regressed in his second season. He's hit kind of that sophomore slump. It's been bad for them, and it's been difficult. Lamar Jackson's taken some of the hardest hits he's taken in his entire career. He had one that Oliver gave him in week 1. Dallas Turner had one that was textbook roughing the passer. And I know some people disagree with the rule, but it still can't pile drive a guy into the ground. That's the rule. So it was a flag, but even still, that's still a hard hit you take from a pretty big guy out there on the edge. So, Myles Garrett, I think every Ravens fan is just kind of assuming he's going to get his. He's going to get there at some point. He's too good of a player not to. And the Ravens offensive line just, it's been in shambles all year, where even a guy like Tyler Linderbaum, who there have been some rumblings about the Ravens decline his 5th-year option earlier this offseason, because that would have reset the center market by like $5 million, and they didn't want to do that. They apparently aren't close to a deal right now. And there are some concerns about okay, is he going to be in Baltimore long-term or not? This essentially could be an audition year for Linderbaum to stay in Baltimore. And some of the stuff that he's had to deal with the players that are flanking him is, I think, made Linderbaum not look as great this season either at times. So that line is going to be number one, because we've even seen in the game against the Vikings, Brian Flores is a very aggressive D coordinator. He's very methodical. And we know that Jim Schwartz is going to have tricks up his sleeve to try to stop Lamar Jackson in this Ravens offense as well. When the Ravens tried to run the ball early in this game, the Ravens have had a problem this year with just getting blown off the ball offensively. Where, the Ravens' bread and butter for all these years in the Lamar Jackson era has been, we're going to go heavy personnel. If you're a defense, you're going to have to match us, and we're just going to absolutely destroy you physically and put you 10 yards down the field and open up these huge rushing lanes behind our huge offensive line and behind Patrick Ricard. That's been what the Ravens have been telling teams. This year, it's been a lot different because defensive linemen are winning up front. And I don't care if you're Lamar Jackson. I don't care if you're Derrick Henry. You have three guys in the backfield on you after the first second and a half of a play. You're not going anywhere. So Derrick Henry had more success running away. He literally ran away from the offensive line to cut outside on some of these plays and to pick up 10, 15 yards. But the Ravens have actually been a lot more successful this season on 3rd and long as opposed to 3rd and short. They're one of the worst short yardage third down teams in the league. They're one of the best 3rd and long teams in the league because they haven't been able to run effectively in some of these situations. So if you can't run the ball effectively, do that against Myles Garrett. He's going to pin his ears back and say, let me just go feast here. You don't want to do that. So I'm with you. That Ravens versus Myles Garrett matchup, the offensive line is going to be massive. Another thing I'm looking at, though, for me, Spencer, for the Ravens defensively versus this Browns offense, is this Browns offense doesn't really work through receivers in the passing game, at least what we've seen. It's been obviously Harold Fannin and David Njoku leading the way receptions-wise, running backs get involved. Jerry Jeudy, I guess this is the revenge game after his comments in week 2, after the Ravens secondary and that whole thing that happened. So I'm curious to see how they use Kyle Hamilton a little bit. And again, what you mentioned with the trade for Loki Gilman, they've used him a lot more up at the line. He's now that Swiss Army knife again, jack of all trades type of player. But these linebackers and safeties matching up against Njoku and Fannin, who just seem to be matchup nightmares. And Fannin being so young and already having some of the production and some of the plays he's made, I could see a long Cleveland successful tenure, kind of like what we've seen from Njoku, and maybe even being the successor or a 1-2 punch there. I'm not sure, but I'm curious to see those two tight ends match up against the Ravens defense.
Well, and those two guys are, I think, the biggest threats in the passing game. You know, Jerry had his best game of the season against New York, a New York team that was, you know, they basically signaled at the trade deadline that they were tanking, that they're trying to play for draft picks, and you know, they made a point in getting Jerry Jeudy the football after that Patriots game before the bye week, where he only had 2 targets the entire game, which was basically like his career low. He had 2 other games where he had less, or he had 2 in another game and he had 1 in another game, and that was a game where he got hurt. So they clearly emphasized we got to get Jerry going early. I think that sort of stays part of the script. What's tough, though, with this Browns offense, and this is another, I think, just you bring up it being a key matchup. I think you're right, because like right now, there's nothing, nobody, no teams they play fear the Browns receivers or pass catchers at all. Like the game plan against the Browns has basically just been, okay, we're going to load the box and stop the run because Quinshon Judkins is your best weapon on offense, and we're going to dare you to beat us. We're going to dare your receivers to try to get separation and push the ball downfield. We're going to dare Dylan Gabriel to be the guy who has to make the plays, and he largely hasn't been able to do that. So I think that probably is a similar script to what the Ravens will play. It's been pretty much week after week after week. It gets kind of, you know, boring at this point talking about it, because I'm just so used to seeing it, these stacked boxes where they're like, try to beat us, and the Browns just don't have the answers to do it. But that said, that's why I think like the other big matchup I'm kind of looking at here, just maybe overarching thought on this matchup in general, is how Dylan Gabriel does play against this Ravens secondary, because that has been the Ravens' weakness largely, and part of that is because, like you alluded to, they can't get pressure on the quarterback without blitzing and bringing extra guys. And so Dylan is continuing to be on this gradual journey towards developing and his growth. And he actually talked on Wednesday about the idea that growth isn't linear. It doesn't always just happen like on a smooth trajectory upward. Sometimes there's some step back, there's some drop off, there's some aggression, then there's some progress. And we've seen a lot more, I think, steps backwards in regression than we have those steps forward at this point for him. So can he, against an inferior secondary and an inferior defense, actually make the plays necessary to get them not being able to stack the box and push the ball downfield and make that an actual threat in their offensive game plan? I don't know if he's up for that, because I haven't seen him do it through 5 weeks just yet. But this is one of those games where you're going to sort of be judging him and grading him highly off of that, because it's a defense that we've seen other teams obviously have success moving the football against. So I think a lot of people, rightfully so, are locked in on the quarterback position for this Browns team. But it's another week where that's going to be something that can either make or break the Browns offense and potentially what happens in this game. If he can move the ball through the air and he's able to have that success finally, it means good things for the Browns. If he can't, then it's probably just going to be another loss and more noise about why they should change quarterbacks and hand things over to Shedeur Sanders.
Yeah, and the Ravens defense still, despite the fact that they have turned it around, are still susceptible to giving up short to medium-sized plays over the middle of the field and kind of having you walk it down to the Ravens 30 or 20-yard line. And then once you get there, they kind of tighten up and say, we're going to bend. But it's the bend, don't break defense mentality, essentially, where they will play off. They don't want to get beat deep. So they're going to have, for example, Malaki Starks has played really well for them over the last 2 weeks, their first round rookie safety. So they're going to have him deep roaming. They don't like to get beat deep. So you're not going to see that like 60-yard touchdown over the top on this Ravens defense. That doesn't really happen. But they will play off coverage and, give you some of that short and intermediate stuff. And that's a way that Dillon Gabriel can move the ball down the field a little bit if the Ravens do give him that. But once it's time for him to punch that ball in the end zone or try to get closer, then the Ravens will say, all right, we're going to just try to force you into a kick on every single possession. And against the Lamar Jackson-led team, assuming Lamar does play in this game after missing practice on Wednesday, that's not a recipe for success in beating the Ravens. So I'm curious because with Gabriel himself and what this Ravens defense has done to younger rookie second-year quarterbacks, it's about confusing him at the line, forcing him into making a bad throw, speeding up that internal clock, forcing him out of the pocket and making him make a tough throw or a tough decision. And the Ravens will live with that. If they do everything right and Gabriel makes an amazing play, which I'm sure there'll be a play or two. We're sitting there like, JJ McCarthy last week, they played him. JJ's barely played in any NFL games either. And he made a couple of throws. He stood in there. I'm like, whoa, all right. This guy's like a 10-year vet, I guess. So I'm expecting Gabriel to have a play or two like that. But it's a matter of, can he put it together consistently? And I'm sure the Ravens will try to stack the box or even just try to put guys up at the line on some plays and say to Dillon Gabriel, you pick or you decide and you guess who's coming. Is it going to be everybody or a guy's going to drop back and it's going to be all but 3 or 4 guys? And those plays can be confusing to younger quarterbacks when they just don't have a lot of experience. And it's nothing against Gabriel or his talent or anything along those lines. It's just like experience is very valuable. And Dillon Gabriel doesn't have a lot of it right now. So look, there are certainly ways Cleveland can win this game on offense. The Ravens defense, again, there are still some things they need to work on. They are by no means a perfect unit right now. The turnovers have really helped them recently, where they couldn't force a turnover at all in the first month and a half of the season. And now it seems like they can't stop forcing them. So that's a big thing. And that gives the Ravens offense the ball back, limits the opposing offenses they've been facing. So if Dillon Gabriel can play a clean game, that gives Cleveland a much better chance, especially if Cleveland's defense can hold it down. But if he starts turning this ball over, I think he could get out of control pretty quickly.
Well, and that is the thing that he's done relatively well to this point in the season, to his first 5 starts, is protect the football. But you asked the $1 million question: can he consistently make the plays on offense? That hasn't been the case to this point. So for every good throw he has, there's 2 or 3 where he soars the ball over somebody's head or misses or almost throws an interception and it gets dropped. So there is certainly a lot of room for him to develop and grow, and it's going to be interesting to see if he can finally take those steps against this Ravens defense. When we get back, it's time to talk through some paths to victory. We've highlighted, I think, a few of talked around some of those ideas here in the last couple segments, but we'll talk about it more in depth here coming up on a crossover edition of Locked On Browns and Locked On Ravens. This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. We all turn to funny places for advice. Your barista, your barber, maybe even a random stranger in the bathroom, but not everyone is the right one when it comes to real support. That's why BetterHelp is here with over 30,000 licensed therapists and more than 10 years of experience. BetterHelp, it finds the right match for you, someone clinically trained and credentialed to guide you through life's biggest challenges. I've caught myself venting to group chats or oversharing with friends who mean well, but listen, they're not therapists. Having someone trained to talk to you to actually get the actual results you're looking for and attempt to make the changes in life is key. BetterHelp is also flexible. You can join sessions online, from home, or on the go, which makes therapy fit into your busy schedule. As the largest online therapy provider in the world, BetterHelp can provide access to mental health professionals with a diverse variety of experience. Find the one for you. With BetterHelp, our listeners get 10% off their first month at BetterHelp.com/LockedOn. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOn. Final segment here between myself, Spencer German, host of Locked On Browns, and Kevin Oestreicher, host of Locked On Ravens, as we get you ready for Sunday's matchup between the two division foes. Kevin, I'll let you go first on this, but what is the path to victory that sort of what is the thing that stands out the most in terms of a way that the Ravens win this football game and beat the Browns for the second time this season and get ready for a tough stretch of the schedule where you play a lot of your division opponents here coming up and sort of set the tone for that for them?
Yeah, I mean, I think it starts up front for the offensive line. You can even talk about it for defense too, just up front in general, where you have to protect Lamar Jackson. You have to open up rushing lanes for Derrick Henry. I'd love for them to use Keaton Mitchell a little bit more as well, who is shown in the moments he's been active and available and playing for them that he can provide a different change of pace than Derrick Henry provides. So I think that's one of the reasons I think the Ravens have a shot in this one. I mean, I think that they're going to be a team that hopefully can establish momentum early, and that starts by opening up on the ground. And then with that, you can use play action to your advantage, where those linebackers will have to take a step up on those run fakes because they have to stop it. And you're like, all right, we can't keep getting gashed. And then you can throw that ball over the top to Mark Andrews, Isaiah Likely, Charlie Kohler's played really well. Rashod Bateman, he's not likely to play in this game, so could be more heavy sets for the Ravens in this one. Another thing I'm looking at for Baltimore in terms of a key to victory is definitely converting on third down. The Browns are a top 10 third down defense this season. They're also top 10 on fourth down and in the red zone. So conversions are going to be really key for them. The Ravens have been better at that in recent weeks, but take advantage of those opportunities and put yourselves, again, even though the Ravens have struggled on third and shorts, still put yourself in those situations because you have Lamar Jackson, you have Derrick Henry. It's been tough at times, but you'd much rather be in a 3rd and 2 as opposed to a 3rd and 10. You can even flip-flop it too, because the Browns have not been good as a third down offense. The Ravens have gotten better as a third down defense, but just get off the field. You can do long sustained drives, tire out Myles Garrett and that Browns defense, even though Myles Garrett is superhuman. So I'm not sure if he ever does get tired, but that's a big key for me. And then just don't make mistakes. The Ravens have played a lot of teams recently that have just made mistake after mistake after mistake. I mean, the Vikings had 8 false starts at home and 13 penalties total, and all the Ravens could do was take advantage. It felt really good to see the Ravens on the positive side of a huge penalty game, because usually that's their thing. The Ravens, they're the one that gets all these back-breaking, drive-killing penalties. So don't get yourself into that groove. These AFC North games, Spencer, you never know with these games. I mean, it just feels like you can be the best team in the league or the worst team in the league, and you match up against another one of these AFC North teams and just throw the records out, throw everything out. It's just going to be hard-fought, physical football. So for Baltimore, don't make mistakes. Play your game, convert on your conversion plays, and make sure you can open the momentum. Because the Ravens are a very momentum-based team where they either get the momentum and they run with it, or they lose it and they just collapse. So if they capture that momentum, could be a long day for Cleveland. But again, anything, I mean, we just saw, I'm sure everybody in Buffalo thought that Miami game was about to be a cakewalk, and look what Miami did to them. So just because you're favored, or just because, you have the better roster, better talent, doesn't mean you're automatically going to win the game.
Well, and that Ravens game in Cleveland last year is a classic example of that, right? Yep. Like the Ravens came in. I don't think anybody was expecting the Browns to win that game. There was a lot of changes that had gone on that week, with a play caller change, quarterback change to Jameis Winston, with Deshaun Watson getting hurt at the time. And all of a sudden, somehow the Browns pulled sort of a rabbit out of a hat and win that game. It was one of the more remarkable things they accomplished last season, just in general. Nobody saw it coming. So yeah, you're right. Like in this division, all bets can be off. But there's certain signs and things of how these teams have been to sort of set the stage for what could unfold on Sunday. But I think you're right. Like the Ravens are playing like, their playoffs already started. Like they have to win all these games. They had to play clean football. I think that's honestly one of the biggest keys or paths to victory for the Browns. Like if they can find a way to turn Lamar Jackson over, if they can find a way to create some of those extra opportunities for the offense, that has been the path to victory really for the Browns this entire season. Then their 2 wins, it took a defensive turnover that sort of set up the offense with an easy touchdown. It took a big special teams play in the Packers game. It took an interception or it took a pick 6 and another turnover against the Dolphins to help that offense get a few extra possessions and set them up with a short field. That has kind of been the recipe. The recipe to success for this offense has kind of revolved around the defense, making your life easy with an assist to give the offense a chance to sort of go in and score. So if they can create some of those opportunities, certainly could change the game, certainly could change the outlook of this one, and set the stage for an upset that I think would shock a lot of people if the Browns pulled it off. The other one is just kind of what I think we talked about in with our key matchups last segment. It is, what is Dillon Gabriel going to do against a Ravens pass rush that when it's just the front four isn't that productive, but when they send extra pressure and as the Ravens try to confuse him, will he see those things?
Spencer's great. Be sure to check him out over at Locked On Browns, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. That's all I have for you here today on Locked On Ravens. Thank you so much for tuning into the show. On the way out, be sure to like and subscribe button in video form and follow along and subscribe in audio form. 5 days a week plus more of daily Ravens coverage coming up tomorrow. We'll have more Ravens talk for you, so be sure to stay tuned for all we have in store, and I'll see you right back here soon on Locked On Ravens.